The carrot your grandmother ate in 1950 contained 75% more copper than the one in your hand today. That's just one vegetable, one mineral, one quiet measure of a crisis that has been unfolding beneath our feet for a century. It is written not in headlines, but in the invisible decline of the food that sustains us. This is the story of how we fed the world and emptied it at the same time. In 2004, biochemist Donald Davis at the University of Texas analyzed 43 crops tracked by the USDA since 1950. The numbers revealed something no one had been looking for. Protein had dropped 6%, calcium 16%, iron 15%, and vitamin C by a fifth. Riboflavin, a crucial B vitamin, had fallen 38%. This was not a study of pesticides or chemicals sprayed on fields. The food itself was changing, becoming less than what it had been. British researchers found the same pattern. Between the 1940s and the 1990s, vegetables in the United Kingdom lost a third of their magnesium. Fruits lost nearly 30% of their calcium, and copper, critical for iron absorption and nervous system function, declined by 3/4 in vegetables. Davis framed his findings carefully. Efforts to breed new varieties that provide greater yield, pest resistance, and climate adaptability have allowed crops to grow bigger and more rapidly, but their ability to manufacture or take up nutrients has not kept pace with their rapid growth. We had created abundance, but abundance wasn't the same as nourishment. The roots of this transformation trace back to a single idea that reshaped the entire future of agriculture. German chemist Justus von Liebig's 1840 book, Organic Chemistry in its Application to Agriculture and Physiology, proposed something radical for its time. Plants fed primarily on minerals drawn from soil, not on compost or humus as farmers had believed for millennia. He identified 3 elements as essential: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and formulated the law of the minimum, arguing that plant growth was limited only by whichever nutrient was scarcest. It was elegant, measurable, and promised control over something humanity had never controlled before: the fertility of the earth itself. 2 years later, English entrepreneur John Bennett Laws turned Liebig's theory into commerce, patenting a process for creating superphosphate fertilizer by treating phosphate rock with sulfuric acid. On his estate in Harpenden, England, he established the Rothamsted Experimental Station, which still operates today as one of the oldest agricultural research institutions in the world. The real transformation came in 1909, when German chemist Fritz Haber developed a process for synthesizing ammonia from atmospheric nitrogen and hydrogen. Engineer Carl Bosch refined the process for industrial scale. Both men won Nobel Prizes. Their invention would eventually feed billions, while fundamentally altering what feeding meant. By 1918, industrial-scale ammonia plants were running in Germany. The same process that made fertilizer also made explosives. When World War II ended, nations converted vast munitions factories to agricultural production. Ammonium nitrate that had filled bombs would now fill fields, beginning the great chemical acceleration of agriculture. By the 1960s, agronomist Norman Borlaug's work developing high-yielding varieties of wheat and rice produced far more grain per acre than traditional crops. Nations once on the brink of famine began exporting surplus. Borlaug received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970, credited with saving 1 billion lives. These varieties required massive inputs of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the same 3 elements Liebig had identified 120 years earlier. Global fertilizer use exploded from roughly 31 million tons in 1960 to 190 million tons by 2020, more than 6 times as much, spread across fields from Iowa to Indonesia. The plants grew tall, and the harvests grew heavy. The soil began to change in ways we didn't measure because we weren't looking. Liebig was right that nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are essential. Plants cannot grow without them. What the industrial system built on his ideas chose to ignore was that those three are not the only elements that matter. Plants need at least 17 essential nutrients: calcium, magnesium, sulfur, iron, manganese, zinc, copper, boron, molybdenum, and others. Some in large amounts, some in traces measured in parts per million. A fertilizer system designed around only 3 elements leaves the other 14 to be mined out with every harvest, each season leaving the soil poorer than the last. Soil is not just a medium that holds nutrients. It is alive, home to bacteria, fungi, nematodes, earthworms, and organisms we are only beginning to understand. Mycorrhizal fungi form partnerships with plant roots, extending far beyond where roots can reach to gather phosphorus, zinc, copper, and other minerals in exchange for sugars from the plant. This relationship is perhaps 400 million years old, and high phosphorus fertilizers disrupt it. When you flood soil with readily available phosphorus, plants do not need the fungi anymore. The partnership breaks, taking with it one of nature's most sophisticated nutrient delivery systems. The result is that we add more fertilizer, but plants absorb less diversity of nutrients. Modern crop varieties are bred for yield, more tons per acre, more bushels per hectare. A cornfield today produces several times what the same field produced in 1950. But there is a biological limit to how fast a plant can manufacture and absorb nutrients. When you breed a plant to grow faster and bigger, it produces more mass, more carbohydrate, more fiber, more bulk, but the mineral content does not increase at the same rate. Scientists call this the dilution effect. The nutrients get spread thinner across more tissue. Even if the soil has not changed, and it usually has, the food itself is less dense with minerals and vitamins. Davis saw both forces at work in his data, soil depletion and genetic dilution, happening simultaneously and compounding each other. We made food more plentiful and, nutrient by nutrient, less complete. The implications extend beyond individual nutrients. When crops lack sufficient minerals, they become more vulnerable to pests and diseases. Farmers respond with more pesticides. The cycle reinforces itself. Depleted soil produces weaker plants, which require more chemical intervention, and that further disrupts soil biology. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations estimates that 24 billion tons of fertile soil are lost every year, eroded by wind, water, and tillage, at a rate 10 to 40 times faster than soil can form. Agricultural soils globally have lost between 50 and 70% of their original carbon stock, organic matter that once held nutrients, supported microbes, and gave soil its structure. In 2015, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations reported that 33% of the world's soils were moderately to highly degraded. That same year, a senior official suggested that at current erosion rates, the world might have only 60 years of topsoil remaining. These are not fringe estimates. They come from the institutions tasked with feeding 8 billion people. The crisis remains strangely invisible. We do not see soil the way we see forests or rivers. It is under our feet, easy to ignore until it is gone. But some farmers are noticing. They are seeing yields plateau despite increasing fertilizer applications. They are watching their soil turn to dust after heavy rains. They are calculating the rising costs of inputs against stagnant crop prices and realizing the math no longer works. Across the world, a different kind of agricultural revolution is taking root, one that looks less like chemistry and more like ecology. Regenerative agriculture focuses not on what we take from the soil, but on what we return. Cover crops that protect and feed the earth between harvests. Reduce tillage that keeps carbon and structure intact. Crop rotations that rebuild diversity. And composting that restores organic matter. Farmers practicing these methods report improvements within years. Soil that crumbles instead of clumping. Water that soaks in instead of running off. Earthworms returning to fields where they had been absent for decades. And yields that stabilize, or even increase, while input costs drop. In 2003, the Harvest Plus program began biofortification efforts, breeding crops not just for yield, but for nutrient density, iron-enriched beans, zinc-enhanced wheat, varieties designed to nourish rather than just fill. These crops are now grown across Africa, Asia, and Latin America, reaching millions of people whose diets lack essential minerals. In 2015, at the Paris Climate Conference, the 4 per Thousand initiative launched with the premise that increasing soil organic matter by just 0.4% per year could sequester enormous amounts of carbon, while simultaneously restoring fertility. Over 600 organizations, from governments to research institutions, have joined the effort. Some companies are changing course as well. Fertilizer manufacturers are developing products that include micronutrients alongside the traditional NPK formulation. Agricultural technology firms are creating soil sensors that measure not just nitrogen levels, but the full spectrum of nutrients and microbial activity. These efforts are real and growing, but they are swimming against a century of momentum. A global food system built around synthetic inputs, maximum yield, and an economic model that rewards volume, not nutrition. British botanist Sir Albert Howard wrote in the 1940s, before most of this decline had even happened, "The health of soil, plant, animal, and man is one and indivisible." We have spent 100 years building a system that treats those 4 things as separate, optimizing one while ignoring the others. We learned to feed more people than ever before in human history, possibly one of our species' greatest achievements. But we did it partly by drawing down an inheritance we did not know we were spending, turning soil into dirt and abundance into a thinner kind of plenty. Standing at the edge of that 60-year horizon, we have to decide what comes next. Do we continue mining the earth until there is nothing left to mine? Or do we remember what farmers knew for millennia, that fertility is not something you extract, but something you tend? The carrot in your hand does not look different from the one your grandmother ate. It weighs the same and costs less. By every visible measure, it is a triumph of modern agriculture. But invisible, down at the molecular level, something has changed. What we choose to do about that, whether we even notice it at all, will determine not just what we eat, but whether the soil beneath us can continue to feed the generations that come after. The earth is still giving. The question is, how much longer it will have anything left to give.